A waitress slaps a black billionaire in a moment of fiery anger, sending shockwaves through an upscale restaurant. But just 10 minutes later, he reveals he owns the place, leaving her stunned. What led her to such a bold move? And why does this powerful man seem more interested in her story than her mistake? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. Emma Daniels, a 24-year-old waitress with auburn hair and green eyes, stood at the entrance of Maison Elegante, her heart pounding against her ribs like a trapped bird. The restaurant's crystal chandeliers cast warm light across marble floors and elegant table settings that probably cost more than her monthly rent. She tugged at the crisp collar of her new white shirt, smoothed her black apron, and took a deep breath. "You've got this," she whispered to herself, tucking a loose strand of auburn hair behind her ear. The weight of her last unpaid electricity bill pressed heavily in her mind, but she pushed the worry aside. This job at Manhattan's most prestigious restaurant was her chance for a fresh start. The maître d' Marcel approached with measured steps. Miss Daniels, ready for your first evening with us?" Emma straightened her shoulders and nodded, willing her voice to sound confident. "Yes, sir. Absolutely." "Remember," Marcel said, his French accent thick but precise, "at Maison Elegante, we don't just serve meals. We create experiences." The next hour passed in a blur of memorized wine lists and carefully balanced plates. Emma's green eyes stayed sharp, watching the other servers, mimicking their graceful movements. Each time she approached a table, she wore her professional smile like armor, shielding the gnawing anxiety that threatened to break through. "Table 12 needs attention," Marcel called out softly. Emma turned toward the section, her practiced smile already in place. The table held just one guest, 45-year-old Billionaire, a black man dressed surprisingly casually for such an upscale establishment. He wore dark jeans and a simple black sweater, yet somehow looked more at home than the surrounding businessmen in their expensive suits. As she approached, she noticed how other staff members treated him with particular deference. There was something magnetic about his presence, a quiet authority that seemed to fill the space around him. Despite his relaxed posture, he carried himself with natural dignity. "Good evening, sir," Emma said, reaching for her notepad. "Welcome to Maison Elegante. I'm Emma, and I'll be taking care of you tonight." The man looked up with kind eyes and a gentle smile. "Thank you, Emma. I'm Nathaniel Harper. I'll start with your sommelier's recommendation for the evening." His voice was deep and measured, with a warmth that made Emma feel instantly at ease. As she wrote down his order, a movement caught her eye, his hand reaching for the water glass. The light caught something gold, and Emma's world tilted sideways. There on his right hand was a ring she would have recognized anywhere. The intricate crest design, the unique way the gold had been worked into elaborate swirls. It was identical to the one her father had worn every day of her life until he disappeared 8 years ago. The memory hit her like a physical blow. Sitting at their small kitchen table, watching her father twist that ring around his finger as he helped her with homework. The way the light would catch it when he tucked her in at night, how it had suddenly vanished along with him, leaving behind a 16-year-old girl with nothing but questions and unpaid bills. Emma's hands began to tremble. The serving tray she held rattled slightly, the water glasses clinking against each other. Her carefully constructed professional facade cracked as waves of emotion crashed over her. Anger, confusion, loss, and a desperate need to know why. She stood frozen, staring at the ring, while around her the restaurant continued its elegant dance of servers and diners. The soft clink of silverware and murmur of conversations seemed to fade into a distant hum. All she could see was that ring glinting in the chandelier light, bringing back 8 years of hurt in a single stunning moment. Memories flashed through her mind in rapid succession. Her father's empty chair at her high school graduation, the lonely nights working double shifts to keep their small apartment, the tearful conversations with bill collectors. Each memory struck harder than the last until she felt like she could barely breathe. Emma's hands trembled as she stared at the ring, her professional mask crumbling. The serving tray clattered as she set it down on a nearby empty table, perhaps too forcefully. Her heart pounded in her ears as she turned back to Nathaniel Harper's table. "That ring," she said, her voice quivering. "Where did you get it?" Nathaniel looked up from his menu, his expression curious, but composed. "I'm sorry?" "The ring on your finger." Emma's voice grew louder, drawing attention from nearby tables. "That exact design. My father had one just like it. He wore it every single day until he disappeared." Nathaniel glanced at his hand, then back at Emma, his calm demeanor unchanged. "Miss, I think there must be some misunderstanding." "No," Emma cut him off, her cheeks flushing red. "There's no misunderstanding. That's my father's ring. Did you steal it from him? Is that why he vanished? What did you do to him?" The elegant murmur of conversation around them began to die down as other diners turned to watch the scene unfolding. Emma's hands were clenched into fists at her sides, her whole body shaking with 8 years of pent-up grief and anger. "Please," Nathaniel said softly, raising his hands in a placating gesture. "Let's discuss this calmly." But Emma was past the point of calm discussion. Years of abandonment, of struggling alone, of wondering why her father had left her. It all came crashing down in this moment. When Nathaniel didn't immediately explain himself, something snapped inside her. "Tell me," she demanded, her voice cracking. "Tell me what happened to my father." Nathaniel's continued silence, his measured gaze, only fueled her rage. Before she could stop herself, before she could even think about what she was doing, Emma's hand flew through the air. The sharp crack of her palm against his cheek echoed through the now silent restaurant. Time seemed to freeze. Diners sat with forks suspended halfway to their mouths. Servers stood motionless, holding trays of food and wine. The only sound was the soft classical music playing through hidden speakers. Nathaniel slowly raised his hand to his reddening cheek, his expression unreadable. He didn't speak, didn't move, just fixed Emma with a steady gaze that seemed to see right through her. "Miss Daniels," the sharp voice of Caroline Hughes cut through the silence like a knife. The restaurant manager's heels clicked rapidly across the marble floor as she approached, her face a mask of controlled fury. "My office, now!" Emma stood rooted to the spot, the reality of what she'd just done beginning to sink in. Caroline Hughes reached her side, her presence commanding immediate attention. "I said now, Miss Daniels." Caroline's voice was low, but carried steel beneath its surface. She turned to Nathaniel, her tone shifting to one of deep concern. "Mr. Harper, I cannot begin to express how sorry we are for this inexcusable behavior." Still, Nathaniel said nothing. He simply watched Emma, his dark eyes intense and searching, while the red mark of her hand bloomed across his cheek. His silence was somehow worse than any reaction he could have had. It made Emma feel small, childish, and completely out of control. The restaurant remained frozen in shocked silence, dozens of eyes fixed on the tableau of Emma, Carolyn, and the strangely calm man with the mysterious ring. In that moment, Emma knew she had destroyed everything she'd worked so hard to build, all because of a piece of jewelry that might not even be what she thought it was. 10 minutes after the slap, the tension in Maison Elegance remained thick enough to cut with a knife. Emma stood in Caroline Hughes's office, her shoulders hunched as the manager berated her. The words, lawsuit and assault, kept coming up, making Emma's stomach twist into tighter knots. Suddenly, a firm knock on the office door interrupted Caroline's lecture. Without waiting for a response, Nathaniel Harper entered, his presence filling the small space. The mark on his cheek had faded to a light pink. "If I may," he said, his deep voice resonating with quiet authority. "I'd like to address this situation myself." Caroline's eyes widened. "Mr. Harper, there's no need for you to—" "Please gather the staff," he said, his tone gentle but brooking no argument. "I believe some introductions are in order." Minutes later, Emma found herself back in the main dining room, standing among her fellow servers and kitchen staff. Her face burned with shame as she felt their sideways glances. Nathaniel stood at the center of the room, commanding attention without effort. "Good evening," he began, addressing both staff and patrons. "I apologize for the disruption to your dining experience. I feel I should introduce myself properly. I'm Nathaniel Harper, and I own Maison Elegance. A wave of whispers swept through the room. Emma's legs went weak and she had to steady herself against a nearby chair. She'd just assaulted the owner of the restaurant. Her chances of keeping this job had just plummeted from slim to none. While I usually prefer to maintain a low profile, Nathaniel continued, tonight's events have made that impossible. His eyes found Emma's across the room. Sometimes unexpected situations require us to adapt. Emma wanted to disappear into the floor. She could feel the stares of her coworkers, could practically hear their thoughts. The new girl had slapped the owner on her first day. The story would probably become restaurant legend. To her surprise, Nathaniel's next words weren't about her termination. Instead, he turned to Caroline and said, "Would you mind if I borrowed your office for a private conversation with Miss Daniels?" Caroline looked startled but quickly composed herself. "Of course, Mr. Harper. Take all the time you need." Emma's heart jumped into her throat. A private conversation? Was he planning to fire her personally? Or worse, press charges? Her mind raced with possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. "Miss Daniels?" Nathaniel's voice was surprisingly gentle. "Would you join me, please?" Emma forced her feet to move, aware of every eye in the restaurant following her as she walked toward Caroline's office. Her hands were trembling so badly she had to clench them into fists to hide it. The short walk felt like crossing an ocean. Nathaniel held the office door open for her, his expression unreadable. As Emma passed him, she caught a whiff of expensive cologne mixed with something earthy and familiar. It triggered another memory of her father, making her heart ache anew. The door closed behind them with a soft click that seemed to echo in Emma's ears like a gunshot. Emma sat across from Nathaniel in his private office, a luxurious space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan's glittering skyline. Her hands trembled in her lap as she struggled to form words. The same ring that had triggered her outburst now caught the warm light of his desk lamp, making the intricate crest shimmer. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Harper," she finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "I completely lost control. It's just that ring." She trailed off, unable to maintain eye contact. Nathaniel leaned forward slightly, his elbows resting on his mahogany desk. His expression remained gentle, showing none of the anger she expected. "Take your time, Emma. I'd like to understand what happened out there." His calm demeanor only made Emma feel worse about her actions. "The ring you're wearing. It looks exactly like one my father had. He disappeared when I was 16, and that ring, it was special to him. He never took it off." Nathaniel glanced at his hand, studying the ring with renewed interest. "I purchased this at an estate auction 3 years ago. The craftsmanship caught my eye." He removed the ring and placed it on the desk between them. "Would you like to take a closer look?" Emma hesitated before picking up the ring. Her fingers traced the familiar pattern, the same intertwined vines and shield she remembered from her childhood. "It's identical," she whispered. "Tell me about your father," Nathaniel said softly, his dark eyes reflecting genuine concern. Emma's throat tightened. Daniels, he worked in finance, or at least that's what he told us. One day, he just vanished. No note, no explanation. Left my mom and me with nothing but debt and questions." She placed the ring back on the desk, fighting back tears. "We lost everything. Had to sell our house, move to a tiny apartment. Mom never recovered from it." Instead of judgment, Nathaniel's face showed understanding. "I know something about loss and hardship," he said, surprising Emma. "My own childhood was marked by poverty. Sometimes the stories behind disappearances are more complex than they seem." He picked up the ring, turning it thoughtfully in his hands. "The auction where I bought this, there might be records, documentation. If this ring is connected to your father, perhaps we could trace its path." Emma stared at him in disbelief. You'd help me? After what I did?" Nathaniel's smile was warm and genuine. "Everyone deserves a second chance, Emma. And everyone deserves to know the truth about their past. He pulled out a business card and wrote something on the back. "This is my personal number. Let me help you find the answers you're looking for." Emma accepted the card with trembling fingers, overwhelmed by this unexpected turn of events. "Thank you," she managed, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll let me help," Nathaniel replied simply, sliding the ring back onto his finger. "We can start looking into the auction records tomorrow if you're willing." Emma nodded, still stunned by his kindness. "Yes," she said softly. "Yes, I'd like that." Emma sat alone in the employee break room, her untouched sandwich growing stale on the table before her. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as her mind drifted back to that rainy October evening 7 years ago, the last time she saw her father. Daniel Daniels had been a different man then, his usually bright eyes dulled by worry and shame. She remembered how his hands, calloused from years of crafting beautiful things, had trembled as he'd hugged her goodbye. "I'll make things right, Emmy," he'd promised, using her childhood nickname. "Just give me time." The memory of his worn leather jacket and the scent of his woodworking shop clung to her thoughts. Before everything fell apart, their family had been happy. Their small house had been filled with the sounds of her father's humming as he worked on his latest creation, the walls decorated with the wooden pieces he'd lovingly crafted. The ring had been his masterpiece, a gold band with their family crest, a design that traced back to their Scottish ancestors. He'd spent months perfecting it, working late into the night after his regular commissions were done. "This is our legacy, Emmy," he'd told her, his eyes sparkling with pride as he'd shown her the finished piece. "As long as we have this, we'll always be connected." But then the bills started piling up. The crafting business that had sustained their family for generations began to crumble under the weight of mass-produced alternatives. She remembered overhearing her parents' whispered arguments late at night, her father's voice heavy with desperation as he talked about loans and debts. Emma's fingers traced the edge of the breakroom table as tears welled in her eyes. The possibility that Nathaniel might help her find answers made her heart race with both hope and terror. What if her father didn't want to be found? What if learning the truth only brought more pain? She thought about the ring on Nathaniel's finger, identical down to the tiniest detail. Her father would never have sold it willingly. It meant too much, represented too much of their family's history. Unless he'd had no choice. The weight of possibility pressed against her chest. Maybe, just maybe, Nathaniel's unexpected kindness was a sign. After years of wondering, of filling the silence with her own worst fears, she might finally understand why her father had walked away. Emma wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and took a deep breath. Despite her instinct to protect herself, to keep her walls firmly in place, she knew she had to take this chance. Nathaniel had shown her nothing but compassion, even after her shocking behavior in the restaurant. If anyone could help her uncover the truth about her father's disappearance, it was him. Her break was nearly over and she hadn't eaten a bite, but Emma felt stronger somehow, more centered. The choice to trust Nathaniel wasn't an easy one, but it felt right. Whatever truth awaited her at the end of this path, she would face it head-on. The Manhattan skyline glittered like scattered diamonds against the night sky as Nathaniel Harper stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse. His reflection stared back at him, a successful man in an expensive suit, but his mind wandered to a time when success seemed impossible. He absently touched the gold ring on his finger, thinking of Emma's reaction earlier that day. Her pain had been raw, genuine, and achingly familiar. 20 years ago, he'd felt that same desperate ache when he'd been forced to sell his mother's silver locket to keep the lights on in their cramped Brooklyn apartment. The memory was still sharp enough to hurt. His mother had worn that locket every day until cancer took her. "Keep it safe," she'd whispered in her final days. "It's all I have left of my mama." But 6 months later, facing eviction and hunger, he'd sold it to a pawn shop for a fraction of its sentimental worth. Nathaniel moved away from the window and settled into his leather armchair, his thoughts heavy with the past. The ring he wore now, Emma's father's ring, had come into his possession through a charity auction 3 years ago. He remembered being drawn to its craftsmanship, the intricate family crest catching his eye among dozens of other pieces. "We all lose things," he murmured to the empty room. "But sometimes we get a chance to make things right." He thought of Emma's fierce determination beneath her vulnerability. She reminded him of himself at that age, proud, hurting, and trying desperately to prove something to the world. The difference was that he'd had to navigate his path alone. Emma wouldn't have to. Reaching for his phone, Nathaniel scrolled through his contacts until he found the number he needed. Marcus Chen was the best private investigator in New York, discreet and thorough. The phone rang 3 times before a familiar voice answered. "Marcus," Nathaniel said, his voice firm with purpose. "I have a case for you. I need you to find someone. Daniel Daniels. He disappeared 7 years ago, leaving behind a daughter and a family heirloom that somehow ended up in my possession." He paused, looking again at the ring that had sparked this journey. "Whatever resources you need, they're yours. This is important." Nathaniel and Emma meet with the investigator, Linda Marks, a meticulous 40-year-old. The private investigator's office felt smaller than Emma had imagined. Linda Marks sat behind a desk cluttered with manila folders and sticky notes, her silver-rimmed glasses catching the afternoon light. Her fingers moved swiftly across her keyboard as she pulled up the auction records. "The ring was sold at Barrett's auction house in 2015, Linda said, her voice steady and professional. "It was part of a lot of repossessed items from various estates." Emma's hands clenched in her lap. Nathaniel, sitting beside her in a simple gray suit, leaned forward with interest. "Can you tell us more about the circumstances?" he asked. Linda nodded, pulling out a thick folder. The ring was originally held by First Metro Bank as collateral for a business loan. When the loan defaulted, it went into their possession. She paused, glancing at Emma. "The borrower's name was Daniel Daniels." Emma's breath caught in her throat. The confirmation hit her like a physical blow, bringing both relief and a fresh wave of pain. It was real. The ring wasn't stolen. It had been taken as payment for her father's debts. "That matches what I remember," Emma said softly. "Dad always wore that ring. He said it was passed down through generations of our family." Nathaniel placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "At least now we know it's the same ring. That's a start." Linda shuffled through more papers. "The interesting thing is that the ring's estimated value was significantly higher than the outstanding loan balance. It seems unusual that someone would use such a valuable family heirloom as collateral." Emma's eyes stung with tears. "He must have been desperate. Things got really bad near the end before he—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "I can trace the chain of ownership from the bank to the auction house," Linda continued, her tone softening. "And I can investigate why such a valuable piece was handled this way. Sometimes there's more to these stories than what appears on paper." Nathaniel nodded thoughtfully. "Please do. Whatever resources you need, I'll provide them." Emma looked at the documents spread across Linda's desk, each paper a piece of her father's final desperate attempts to keep his business afloat. The familiar ache of abandonment mixed with a new feeling. Understanding. Maybe her father hadn't just given up and walked away. Maybe there was more to the story. "I'll need a few days to follow up on some leads," Linda said, closing the folder. "There are some irregularities in the paperwork that warrant further investigation." "Irregularities?" Emma asked, sitting up straighter. "Nothing concrete yet," Linda replied with a reassuring smile. "But I promise you, if there's more to find about your father and this ring, I'll find it." Emma nodded, feeling a small spark of hope flutter in her chest. For the first time in years, the mystery of her father's disappearance didn't feel like an impossible weight. She had help now, real, tangible help from people who seemed to genuinely care about finding the truth. "Thank you," she whispered, looking between Linda and Nathaniel. "Both of you." Linda's expression softened as she gathered her notes. We'll get to the bottom of this, Emma. Sometimes the past leaves us breadcrumbs. We just need to know where to look. The small French bistro was tucked away on a quiet street far from the glamour of Maison Elegance. Emma stood outside Le Petit Coin, watching through the window as Nathaniel waved to her from a corner table. Her fingers fidgeted with the strap of her worn purse before she pushed open the door. I hope this place is okay, Nathaniel said as she sat down. I thought we could use somewhere quieter to talk. The warm lighting and checkered tablecloths gave the restaurant a cozy feel, worlds away from the usual establishment someone of Nathaniel's status might frequent. Emma relaxed slightly as she settled into her chair. It's perfect, she said, meaning it. Reminds me of the places my dad and I used to go to when I was little. Nathaniel smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. You know, I grew up eating at places just like this, when we could afford to eat out at all. Emma's eyebrows rose in surprise. But you're a billionaire? He chuckled softly. That came much later. I grew up in the Bronx, sharing a 2-bedroom apartment with my parents and 3 siblings. Some months, we barely made rent. As their wine arrived, Nathaniel told Emma about his childhood. The second-hand clothes, the free school lunches, the constant worry about money. His voice grew softer as he described his mother working 2 jobs to keep food on the table. We lost everything when I was 16, he said, running his finger along the rim of his glass. The recession hit, and both my parents lost their jobs. We ended up in a shelter for 3 months. Emma's throat tightened. That must have been terrible. It was. But it taught me something important. About resilience. About family. He paused, studying her face. Your father's ring. It means more than just jewelry to you, doesn't it? Emma nodded, fighting back tears. We weren't always struggling. Dad had a good business. A nice house. But when things went bad, they went bad fast. The ring was the last thing we had that connected us to better times. Their food arrived, simple but elegant dishes that steamed in the candlelight. Emma found herself sharing stories she hadn't told anyone, about helping her father with paperwork late into the night, about the day the electricity was cut off, about the shame in his eyes when he couldn't afford her school supplies. The hardest part wasn't losing the money, she admitted, pushing her food around her plate. It was watching him lose himself. He stopped being the confident, happy dad I knew. It was like he became a shadow. Nathaniel listened intently, his own meal forgotten. Success and failure can both be heavy burdens to carry. Sometimes people make choices that seem wrong to others because they can't see another way out. Emma looked up at him, really seeing him for the first time, not as the wealthy owner of Maison Elegance, but as someone who understood what it meant to struggle, to lose everything, to fight your way back up. How did you do it? She asked softly. How did you go from that shelter to where you are now? One step at a time, reply. Please. And... people who believed in me, who gave me chances I didn't always deserve. He smiled warmly. Sometimes the right person showing up at the right time can change everything. In that moment, Emma felt something shift between them. The wall she'd built around herself, made of hurt and distrust, began to crack. Here was someone who had walked through the same darkness her father had faced, but had found his way to the light. The morning sun streamed through the windows of Nathaniel's office as he answered his phone. Linda's voice crackled with excitement on the other end. "I've found something," she said. "The ring passed through Marshall & Sons auction house in Chicago 7 years ago. Their records show it was part of a larger estate sale." Nathaniel's eyes lit up as he scribbled down the details. "Do they still have the documentation?" "Better than that," Linda replied. "The original appraiser still works there. He remembers the ring because of its unique crest." Emma sat across from Nathaniel, watching his expression change. Her hands gripped the armrests of her chair so tightly her knuckles turned white. When he hung up the phone, she could barely breathe. "They found it?" she whispered. Nathaniel nodded, his face gentle. "The auction house in Chicago has records. We might be able to trace where the ring came from, and where it went after." Emma's heart raced. Chicago. It seemed both so close and impossibly far. "When can we go?" "I can have the company jet ready tomorrow morning," Nathaniel said, already reaching for his laptop. "But Emma, are you sure you're ready for this? Whatever we find might hurt," she finished for him. Her voice trembled slightly, but her chin lifted with determination. "I've been hurting for years, wondering what happened to him. Not knowing is worse." Back in her tiny apartment, Emma pulled her old suitcase from under her bed. Dust covered its surface. She hadn't traveled anywhere since moving to New York 3 years ago. Every spare penny had gone toward rent and bills. As she folded clothes into the suitcase, her hands shook. What would they find in Chicago? Would it lead her closer to her father, or just to another dead end? The weight of possibility pressed against her chest, making it hard to breathe. Her phone buzzed with a text from Nathaniel. "Car will pick you up at 7 a.m. Try to get some rest." Rest seemed impossible. Emma sat on the edge of her bed holding an old photo of her father. In it, he was smiling, his arm around her 13-year-old self. The ring gleamed on his finger, catching the light just as it had on Nathaniel's hand that first night at Maison Elegance. "I'm going to find out what happened to you," she whispered to the photograph. "Even if the truth hurts, I need to know." She placed the photo carefully in her suitcase, tucking it between layers of clothes. Whatever answers waited in Chicago, she would face them. She had spent too long running from the past, too long letting fear and anger guide her decisions. With steady hands, she zipped the suitcase closed. Tomorrow would bring her one step closer to understanding why her father had disappeared, why he had sold their family's precious heirloom. One step closer to either forgiveness or closure. She wasn't sure which she hoped for more. The Marshall & Sons auction house stood like a testament to old Chicago, its brick facade weathered but dignified. Inside, Emma and Nathaniel followed Mr. Peterson, the manager, through narrow hallways lined with artifacts and artwork. "Here it is," Mr. Peterson said, placing a thick folder on his mahogany desk. The ring was part of Lot 247, sold in December 7 years ago. His fingers traced down the yellowed paperwork. Emma leaned forward, her heart pounding. The documentation was there in black and white. Daniel Daniels had personally brought the ring to the auction house. Her throat tightened as she read the details. "He came in himself," Mr. Peterson explained, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. "Said he needed to settle some debts. The ring fetched a good price, nearly $50,000. Emma's hands began to shake. "He sold it willingly?" Her voice cracked on the last word. All these years she had imagined the ring being taken from him, imagined him fighting to keep their family's legacy. But he had walked in and handed it over. Nathaniel placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "There must be more to the story, Emma." "There usually is," Mr. Peterson added kindly. The gentleman seemed quite distressed about selling it. Kept saying something about protecting his family. Emma closed her eyes, fighting back tears. Protecting them? By disappearing? By selling their history without a word? The familiar anger bubbled up, but now it mixed with confusion and hurt. "Did he ever say why?" she managed to ask. "Why did he needed the money so urgently?" Mr. Peterson shook his head. "He was very private about that, but..." He rifled through the papers again. "We did need an address for our records. It might not be current, but I can give you what we have." Nathaniel squeezed Emma's shoulder gently. "It's your choice, Emma. We can stop here if you want." Emma took a deep breath, steadying herself. The anger and betrayal still churned inside her, but beneath it was something else, a need to understand. "No," she said firmly. I need to know. Please, Mr. Peterson, what's the address? The manager wrote it down on a crisp business card, his neat handwriting spelling out a location in Milwaukee. Emma stared at the card, those few lines of text representing either an end to her search or just another painful dead end. Emma nodded, unable to speak. Her father had been just a few hours away all this time. The address burned in her vision, making all her carefully constructed walls begin to crumble. The morning headlines blazed across social media. Billionaire Nathaniel Harper assaulted at his own restaurant. Accompanying the sensational text was a grainy cell phone video of Emma slapping Nathaniel, played on repeat across every major news network. Victor Lane, owner of the competing Le Petit Jardin, sat in his office with a satisfied smirk as he watched the story unfold. He had paid a hefty sum to one of Maison Elegance's busboys for the footage, and it was worth every penny. The media circus was exactly what he needed to tarnish Nathaniel's sterling reputation. Mr. Harper's establishments have clearly lost their standard of excellence, Victor told reporters, his carefully rehearsed concern masking his glee. When staff members assault customers, even if that customer turns out to be the owner, it raises serious questions about management. At Maison Elegance, Emma's hand shook as she scrolled through the barrage of negative comments online. The restaurant's phones rang constantly with reporters seeking comments. She felt sick to her stomach, knowing she had handed Nathaniel's rivals the perfect weapon. "I'm so sorry," she whispered when Nathaniel entered the office, his usual calm demeanor strained around the edges. "This is all my fault." Nathaniel loosened his tie and sank into his chair. "Victor Lane has been trying to discredit me for years. He finally found his opportunity." "Your board members are calling for my termination, aren't they?" Emma asked, her voice small. "They are," Nathaniel admitted, "but I won't let them pressure me into making decisions that go against my principles." Emma stood up straighter, squaring her shoulders. "Then, let me help fix this. Let me speak to the press." Her green eyes flashed with determination. "I won't let Victor Lane use me to hurt you. Not when you've shown me nothing but kindness." "Emma, you don't have to—" "Yes, I do," she interrupted. "You're risking your reputation to help me find my father. The least I can do is stand by you publicly and tell the truth about what happened." Nathaniel studied her for a long moment, seeing the same fierce determination he'd recognized in her from the beginning. Finally, he nodded. "All right, we'll face this together." Emma felt a wave of relief, followed by renewed purpose. Victor Lane might have thought he could use her moment of weakness to attack Nathaniel, but he had underestimated both of them. She would make sure the world knew exactly what kind of man Nathaniel Harper really was. Not just a billionaire, but someone who showed compassion when others would have shown the door. Linda's call came just as Emma was finishing her shift at Maison Elegance. Nathaniel invited her into his office, putting the call on speaker. Linda's businesslike voice filled the room. "I've found something interesting," Linda said. "While tracking the ring's paper trail, I discovered a shipping manifest from 10 years ago. Several boxes of Daniel Daniels' belongings were sent to a storage facility in Detroit after the repossession." Emma's hands gripped the arms of her chair. Her heart raced at the thought of what those boxes might contain. "Are they still there?" "The facility is still in operation," Linda confirmed. "I can't guarantee the boxes are there, but it's worth checking out. The manifest lists unit number 247. Nathaniel watched Emma's face carefully. He could see the conflict in her expression, hope warring with fear. "What do you think, Emma?" he asked gently. Emma took a shaky breath. I want to know, but what if we find something I'm not ready for?" Her voice trembled slightly. "What if there are answers I don't want to hear?" Nathaniel leaned forward, his dark eyes kind but serious. "The truth isn't always easy, but it's better than living with questions that haunt you. Whatever we find, you won't face it alone." Emma nodded, drawing strength from his steady presence. "You're right. I've come this far. I need to see this through. I can arrange for us to fly to Detroit tomorrow, Nathaniel offered. The sooner we check this lead, the better. I'll email you all the details about the storage facility, Linda added. And Emma, remember, whatever you find, it's just one more piece of the puzzle. It doesn't define your whole story. Emma felt a surge of gratitude for these people who'd become such unexpected allies in her search. Thank you, both of you. Yes, let's go to Detroit. After finalizing the travel arrangements, Emma and Nathaniel stood to leave the office. Emma paused at the door, looking back at him. Why do you keep doing all this? The media scandal would go away if you just fired me. Nathaniel's expression softened. Because everyone deserves a chance to understand their past. And sometimes, we need help to face it. They agreed to meet at the airport the next morning. As Emma gathered her things to leave, she felt that familiar mix of anticipation and dread churning in her stomach. But this time, it was tempered by something else. The knowledge that whatever awaited her in Detroit, she wouldn't have to face it alone. The Detroit storage facility loomed before them, a sprawling complex of identical metal doors stretching into the distance. Unit 247 was located in the back corner, its blue paint peeling and faded from years of neglect. The facility manager fumbled with his keys, finally unlocking the heavy padlock. Emma held her breath as the door creaked open. Dust particles danced in the beam of sunlight that cut through the darkness. The musty smell of forgotten memories filled her nostrils. "Take your time," Nathaniel said softly, standing just behind her. Emma stepped inside, her eyes adjusting to the dim light. Cardboard boxes were stacked against the walls, some crushed under the weight of years. But it was the familiar shapes that made her gasp. Her father's old leather armchair, the wooden trunk that had sat at the foot of her parents' bed, photo albums tied together with twine. Her hands trembled as she reached for the nearest box. Inside, she found her father's old sweaters, still carrying the faint scent of his aftershave. Tears welled in her eyes as she lifted one to her face. "Emma, look at this!" Linda called from deeper in the unit. She held up a weathered, leather-bound book. "It appears to be your father's journal." Emma took the journal with shaking hands and settled onto the old armchair. The pages were filled with her father's familiar handwriting, some entries neat and ordered, others rushed and desperate. "May 15th, she read aloud, her voice quavering. "The bank called again today. I don't know how to tell Sarah and Emma that we're losing everything. My little girl deserves better than this. How do I explain that her college fund is gone?" Nathaniel placed a gentle hand on her shoulder as she continued reading. "June 3rd, watched Emma graduate middle school today. She looked so proud in her new dress. Sarah scraped together the money somehow. My heart breaks knowing what's coming. Maybe if I leave now, they'll have a chance to start fresh without my mistakes weighing them down." The tears fell freely now, dropping onto the worn pages. "He left to protect us," Emma whispered. "All this time, I thought he just abandoned us." Linda's voice cut through Emma's emotional haze. "I found something else." She held up a thick ledger book, its pages yellow with age. "It's a record of the auction house transactions. The ring sale is listed here, handled by Berkshire Auctions in Philadelphia." Emma clutched the journal to her chest, overwhelmed by the morning's discoveries. The storage unit around her held more than just forgotten possessions. It held pieces of her father's heart, preserved in ink and paper, waiting all these years to tell their story. The rental car hummed quietly as they drove back from the storage facility. Emma sat in the passenger seat, still holding her father's journal close to her chest. Nathaniel kept his eyes on the road, but his mind wandered to memories he hadn't visited in years. "You know," he said softly, breaking the comfortable silence, "seeing all those belongings back there reminded me of something from my own past." Emma turned to look at him, noticing how his usual confident demeanor had softened. "What is it?" "When I was 12, my mother had this beautiful pearl necklace. It was the only thing she had left from her grandmother." Nathaniel's grip tightened slightly on the steering wheel. We were 3 months behind on rent and the landlord was threatening to evict us. One night I heard her crying in her room. The next morning, the necklace was gone. Emma watched as emotion flickered across his face. She pawned it? Yes, she thought I didn't know, but I saw the pawn shop receipt in her purse. He paused, swallowing hard. She never got it back. That necklace meant everything to her, but she gave it up so we wouldn't end up on the street. I'm so sorry, Emma whispered, seeing Nathaniel in a new light. The polished billionaire facade had cracked, revealing someone who understood loss just as intimately as she did. That's why I wanted to help you, Emma. When you told me about your father's ring, I saw my mother's necklace. Sometimes the things we lose aren't just things. They're pieces of who we are, who we loved. Emma felt tears welling up again, but these were different from the ones she'd shed in the storage unit. These came from a place of connection, of finally being understood. Everyone sees you as this successful businessman who has everything, she said. But you've been through it too, haven't you? Nathaniel nodded, a sad smile playing at his lips. Money can't erase memories, good or bad. Sometimes I look at everything I've built and still feel like that 12-year-old boy, watching his mother cry over a necklace. The car slowed to stop at a red light, and Nathaniel turned to face Emma. We're going to find out what happened to your father, he said with quiet determination. Every piece of this puzzle, every step of his journey. We'll uncover it all, I promise you that, Emma, no matter how long it takes. Victor Lane sat in his dimly lit office, a satisfied smirk playing across his face as he scrolled through the latest post on City Whispers, one of Manhattan's most notorious gossip blogs. The headline read, Billionaire's Restaurant Drama? Violence and Cover-Ups at Maison Elegance. Perfect, he muttered, taking a sip of his scotch. He had carefully leaked just enough information to create doubt, while withholding context that would explain Emma's actions. The story portrayed Nathaniel as a powerful businessman protecting a violent employee, suggesting darker motivations behind his decision. At Maison Elegance, Emma's phone buzzed with notifications as the story spread. Her hands shook as she read the article, each word feeling like a personal attack. The comments section was already filling with speculation and criticism. I've ruined everything, she whispered, slumping against the break room wall. Her initial impulsive action had now snowballed into a public relations nightmare for Nathaniel. Nathaniel's office was a flurry of activity as his PR team worked phones and drafted statements. Despite the chaos, he remained composed, his main concern being Emma's well-being. Finding her in the break room, he saw the distress written across her face. Emma, he said gently, look at me, this isn't your fault. But it is, she protested, holding up her phone. They're saying horrible things about you because of what I did. I should have never... Stop, Nathaniel interrupted, firmly but kindly. We knew something like this might happen. What matters is how we handle it together. His PR director, Mia Noah, entered the break room with a tablet in hand. Mr. Harper, we need to get ahead of this. The story's gaining traction. Nathaniel nodded, keeping his calm demeanor. Start tracking down the source. Someone fed this to the blog deliberately. I want to know who. Emma straightened up, wiping her eyes. I want to help. If people need to hear the truth, I'll tell them. I'll give interviews, whatever it takes. You've done so much for me. I won't let them drag your name through the mud. Nathaniel's expression softened at her determination. We'll face this together, Emma. That's what matters. He turned to Mia. Get the team working on finding the leak. And prepare a statement. But we do this our way, with honesty and dignity. Mia nodded and hurried out, already making calls. Emma felt a surge of resolve replace her guilt. She wouldn't let unnamed sources and partial truths destroy what Nathaniel had built, nor would she let them derail their search for her father. Linda Marks spread the weathered ledger across Nathaniel's mahogany desk, her finger tracing along columns of numbers and dates. The afternoon sun streaming through the office windows highlighted the yellowed pages. Look here, she said, pointing to several entries. These transactions don't add up. The dates are inconsistent, and the values seem artificially low. She pulled out a calculator, crunching numbers quickly. Based on market rates at the time, these items were sold for roughly 40% of their actual worth. Emma leaned closer, her heart racing as she studied the familiar items listed. Her grandmother's china set, her father's collection of vintage watches, and finally, the ring. Each item carried memories of happier times, when their family was whole. "What does this mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Nathaniel, standing behind his desk with his hands in his pockets, spoke carefully. "It suggests your father might have been pressured into these sales. The pattern here," he gestured to the ledger, "indicates someone might have been taking advantage of his vulnerable position." Linda nodded in agreement. "I've seen similar patterns in cases involving predatory lenders. They often force quick sales at reduced prices, using threats or manipulation." Emma sank into one of the leather chairs, her mind spinning. All these years, she'd carried anger toward her father, believing he'd simply given up and abandoned them. But now, looking at the evidence before her, a different picture was emerging. "So he might not have wanted to sell these things?" she asked, her voice catching. "He might have been forced?" "The evidence points that way," Linda confirmed, pulling out additional papers from her briefcase. "I've found references to several creditors who were known for aggressive collection tactics. Some were later investigated for illegal practices." Nathaniel moved around the desk, sitting in the chair next to Emma. "We can dig deeper into these creditors," he suggested gently. "Follow the paper trail, track down the auction records. There might be more to uncover about what really happened." Emma nodded slowly, her earlier anger at her father transforming into something more complex, a need to understand. She picked up the ledger, running her fingers over her father's familiar handwriting in the margins. Each notation now seemed less like a record of betrayal and more like pieces of a puzzle she hadn't known existed. "I want to know everything," she said firmly, looking up at Nathaniel and Linda. "If someone forced him into this, if there's more to why he left." She took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders. "I need to understand what really happened." The small town of Millbrook, Indiana, with its tree-lined streets and well-worn storefronts, felt frozen in time. Emma's hands trembled as she gripped the steering wheel of the rental car, following the directions to a modest craftsman house on Cedar Street. Nathaniel sat quietly beside her, offering silent support. The house needed paint, but the garden showed careful attention. Beds of bright marigolds lined the walkway, and wind chimes tinkled softly from the porch. Emma's breath caught as she spotted a figure working in the garden, his back turned to them. "That's him," she whispered, recognizing her father's familiar stance even after all these years. Daniel Daniels looked older, his hair grayer, his shoulders slightly stooped, but his movements were the same as she remembered from childhood days spent watching him tend their family garden. Emma stepped out of the car, her legs unsteady. Nathaniel remained by the vehicle, giving her space for this moment. The crunch of gravel under her feet made Daniel turn around. Time seemed to stop as father and daughter locked eyes. Daniel's weathered face went pale, and the gardening trowel slipped from his fingers. "Emma?" His voice cracked on her name in Dad. The word felt strange on her tongue after so many years of silence. Daniel took a hesitant step forward, then stopped, uncertainty written across his features. "I didn't think you'd want to see me." Emma's carefully prepared words deserted her. "Why?" she managed to ask. "Why did you leave us?" Daniel's eyes filled with tears. "I thought I was protecting you," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "The debts, they weren't just about money. There were people, dangerous people, making threats. They said they'd come after the family if I didn't pay." Emma felt her knees weaken. Nathaniel appeared at her side, steadying her with a gentle hand on her elbow. "I couldn't let them hurt you or your mother," Daniel continued, pain etched in every line of his face. "So I sold everything I could, gave them what I had. But it wasn't enough. They wanted more. I knew the only way to keep you safe was to disappear." "You could have told us," Emma said, tears streaming down her face. "We thought you abandoned us." Daniel's shoulders slumped. "I was ashamed. I'd failed as a provider, as a father. And I thought if you hated me, it would be easier than living in fear." He wiped his eyes with trembling hands. "I was wrong. So wrong. Not a day has gone by that I haven't regretted leaving the way I did." Emma took a step forward, then another. "All these years I've been so angry," she said softly. "But you were trying to protect us?" Daniel nodded, unable to speak. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a worn photograph. Emma, at her high school graduation, clipped from a local newspaper. "I've followed your life from afar," he admitted. "Every achievement, every milestone, I'm so proud of the woman you've become, Emma, even though I had no right to be proud." The wall of anger Emma had built around her heart began to crack. "Dad," she whispered. And then she was moving forward, into her father's arms. They clung to each other, both crying openly as years of pain and misunderstanding began to heal. "I'm so sorry," Daniel sobbed, holding his daughter close. "Can you ever forgive me?" Emma's answer was muffled against his shoulder as she nodded, feeling the familiar comfort of her father's embrace that she'd missed for so long. In Daniel's modest living room, steam rose from 3 mismatched teacups on a scratched coffee table. Afternoon light filtered through faded curtains, casting soft shadows on family photos that lined the walls. Moments Daniel had missed but carefully collected from local newspapers and distant relatives. "It started with the construction company," Daniel began, his hands wrapped tightly around his cup. "I'd taken loans to expand, thinking I could handle bigger projects. But then the housing market crashed." His voice wavered. "Everything fell apart so fast." Emma sat rigid on the worn couch, her tea untouched. Nathaniel observed from an armchair, his presence providing silent support. "The banks called in the loans," Daniel continued, staring into his cup. "I tried everything. Second mortgages, private lenders. But each solution just dug the hole deeper." He looked up at Emma, his eyes filled with shame. "Then I met Victor Lane." Emma's breath caught. "Victor Lane? The restaurant owner?" Daniel nodded slowly. He wasn't just a restaurant owner back then. He was involved in predatory lending, offered to help save the house, save the business, but his interest rates were impossible. His hands trembled. "When I couldn't pay, his collectors started showing up at the house. They'd watch you walk to school." Tears spilled down Emma's cheeks. "Why didn't you tell us? We could have moved, started over somewhere else together." "I was supposed to protect you," Daniel's voice cracked. "Your mother had such faith in me, and you looked at me like I could fix anything. The shame of failing you both, it ate me alive." Nathaniel leaned forward. "Emma, tell him how you felt," he encouraged gently. "He needs to hear it." Emma's hands clenched in her lap. "You think disappearing protected us?" Her voice shook with years of pent-up hurt. "Do you know what it was like, Dad? Mom working 3 jobs, me lying awake wondering if you were dead in a ditch somewhere?" She stood up, anger and pain breaking through her composure. "We would have faced anything with you. Why didn't you trust us enough to let us help?" Daniel seemed to shrink into himself. "I didn't trust myself," he whispered. "I thought you deserved better than a father who'd lost everything." "We deserved a father who stayed," Emma's voice cracked with emotion. "Not perfect, just present. How could you think your absence was better than your failure?" Daniel reached beneath the worn cushion of his armchair, pulling out a weathered manila envelope. His hands trembled as he held it out to Emma. "There's something else you need to know," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Before I left, I sold everything I could, my tools, my truck, even my father's pocket watch. I put every penny into a trust fund for you." Emma stared at the envelope, her anger momentarily forgotten. "A trust fund?" Daniel nodded, spreading out faded legal documents on the coffee table. "It wasn't much, about $30,000, but I made sure it was set up to gain interest until you turned 18. His shoulders slumped. I thought at least this way I could help secure your future, even if I wasn't there." Emma's hands shook as she picked up the papers. Her previous fury melted into confusion. "I never knew about this. Nobody ever told me." "The lawyer who helped me set it up," Daniel explained, running a hand through his gray hair. "He passed away unexpectedly. Then the firm handling the trust got bought out. I tried checking on it from afar, but without revealing myself." "Rai, calm," trailed off, the weight of his choices visible in his tired eyes. Emma sank back onto the couch, the documents clutched to her chest. All those years of struggling to make ends meet, working double shifts at diners, skipping meals to pay rent, while somewhere, somehow, her father had tried to provide for her. "I thought I was doing the right thing," Daniel said softly. "But like everything else, I managed to mess this up too." Nathaniel, who had been quietly observing, leaned forward to examine one of the documents. His experienced eyes scanned the legal terminology, and a slight frown creased his forehead. "This isn't a dead end," he said, his calm voice cutting through the emotional tension. "The money should still be there, just tied up in legal complications. With the right team of lawyers, we can trace the fund's history and untangle this." He turned to Emma, his expression gentle but determined. "Let me help with this. I have connections in financial law who specialize in recovering lost assets." Emma looked between the documents, her father and Nathaniel, tears welling in her eyes. The anger that had sustained her for so long was giving way to something more complicated. A mix of grief for what was lost and tentative hope for what might be recovered. In a sleek conference room at Nathaniel's office, Emma sat between her father and Nathaniel. As Charlotte Liam, the head of the legal team, presented their findings. Spreadsheets and documents covered the polished table. The trust fund wasn't lost, it was caught in administrative limbo when the original firm was acquired, Charlotte explained, pointing to a timeline on her tablet. The good news is, with compound interest over these years, the original $30,000 has grown to just over $98,000. Emma's breath caught in her throat. The amount seemed impossible. More money than she'd ever had access to in her life. She glanced at her father, who sat with his shoulders hunched, twisting his worn wedding ring. "All this time," Emma whispered, "while I was working double shifts and eating ramen noodles." Her voice cracked. Daniel reached for her hand but stopped halfway, uncertain. "I'm so sorry, Emma. I thought I was protecting you by leaving, but I just made everything worse. The money was supposed to help, not get locked away when you needed it most." Nathaniel watched the exchange with understanding in his eyes. He'd seen countless families torn apart by money, both its presence and absence. But here was a chance for healing. "The paperwork to release the funds will take about 2 weeks," Charlotte continued. "After that, Ms. Daniels will have full access to the account." Emma stood abruptly, walking to the window that overlooked the city. The afternoon sun caught the tears on her cheeks. Behind her, she heard the quiet shuffle of papers as Charlotte excused herself from the room. "I don't know how to feel about this," Emma admitted, her voice small. "All those years of being angry, thinking you abandoned us without a second thought." She turned to face her father. "But you were trying to help in your own way." Daniel's eyes were red-rimmed. "I was a coward, Emma. Instead of facing our problems together as a family, I ran. The trust fund was my way of trying to make up for it, but money can't replace a father's presence." Nathaniel stood, his presence steady and reassuring. "Emma, the money is important, but it's not what matters most right now. You have something more valuable, the chance to understand your father's choices and perhaps build something new." Emma wrapped her arms around herself, looking between the two men. "I spent so long being angry that I don't know how to stop." "Then don't try to stop," Nathaniel suggested gently. Feel what you need to feel, but maybe leave room for other emotions too. Your father made mistakes, but he also made sacrifices out of love for you." Daniel nodded, finally finding the courage to meet his daughter's gaze. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, Emma, but if you're willing, I'd like the chance to be part of your life again. Not because of the money, but because you're my daughter and I've missed you every day." The morning headlines hit like a tidal wave. Victor Lane's fabricated document spread across social media and news outlets, suggesting that Emma's emotional confrontation with Nathaniel had been nothing more than an orchestrated publicity stunt. The documents, expertly forged, appeared to show payments made to Emma before the incident. Emma's hands shook as she read the latest article on her phone. How dare they? How dare they turn this into some cheap publicity scheme? She paced Nathaniel's office, her face flushed with anger. Nathaniel stood by the window, his usual calm demeanor, strained. Dark circles under his eyes revealed sleepless nights dealing with the mounting crisis. Victor Lane has always been ruthless, but this crosses a line. "People actually believe this garbage," Emma said, scrolling through the comments. "They're calling me an attention-seeking fraud. Some are even suggesting I'm blackmailing you." Nathaniel's PR team had assembled in the conference room next door, but their voices felt distant as Emma and Nathaniel processed the situation. "I won't let him destroy your reputation," Emma declared, setting her phone down firmly. "Not after everything you've done for me. Not after helping me find my father." Nathaniel turned from the window. "Emma, you don't have to—" "Yes, I do." Her voice was steady now, determination replacing anger. "I need to tell my story. Our story. The truth about the ring, about my father, about how you helped me when you could have just had me fired." "A press conference is risky," Nathaniel warned. "Victor will twist whatever you say." "Let him try." Emma straightened her shoulders. "I'm not afraid anymore. I've spent too many years running from my past, just like my father did. It's time to face things head on." Nathaniel studied her for a moment, then nodded. "If you're sure about this, I'll have my team arrange everything. But Emma, once you step into that spotlight, there's no going back." "I know." She managed a small smile. "But I learned from the best that sometimes you have to stand up for what's right, even when it's scary." They spent the next hour outlining their strategy. Emma would tell her story, all of it. The pain of her father's disappearance, the significance of the ring, and Nathaniel's compassionate response to her outburst. No scripted answers, no corporate spin, just the raw, honest truth. As Nathaniel's PR team filed in with their suggestions and concerns, Emma felt a strange sense of peace. For the first time since the scandal broke, she wasn't afraid. She knew who she was and what had really happened. More importantly, she knew that standing up for the truth was worth any backlash Victor Lane could throw at them. "Schedule it for tomorrow morning," she told the PR team. "The sooner we get ahead of this, the better." The press conference room buzzed with anticipation. Camera flashes lit up the podium where Emma stood, her hands clasped tightly together. She wore a simple navy dress, her auburn hair pulled back neatly. The sea of reporters before her felt overwhelming, but she drew strength from Nathaniel's steady presence beside her. "Good morning," she began, her voice clear despite her racing heart. "I'm here to address the recent allegations about the incident at Maison Elegance." She paused, taking a deep breath. "The truth is both simpler and more complex than what you've read." Emma's voice grew stronger as she recounted her story. She spoke of her father's disappearance, the family ring that had meant so much, and the shock of seeing its twin on Nathaniel's finger that fateful night. "I acted out of pain and confusion," she admitted, her green eyes glistening. "The ring represented everything I'd lost, and in that moment, my emotions got the better of me. What happened next showed me the true measure of a person's character." She turned slightly toward Nathaniel. "Instead of having me fired or pressing charges, Mr. Harper showed me compassion. He listened to my story and offered to help find answers about my father. His kindness changed my life." The reporters leaned forward, captivated by the raw honesty in her voice. Emma held up the documents Victor had leaked. These papers suggesting I was paid to create drama are completely false. The real story is about forgiveness, understanding, and the power of second chances. As Emma finished speaking, Nathaniel stepped forward. His presence commanded attention, but his voice was warm with sincerity. Everything Ms. Daniels has shared is true. Her strength in facing her past and standing here today exemplifies the kind of character we need more of in this world. The mood in the room shifted. Reporters who had arrived expecting scandal instead found themselves moved by a story of redemption and grace. When questions began, they focused not on the allegations, but on Emma's journey of reconciliation with her father and Nathaniel's role in helping her. Victor Lane's fabricated documents held up against the authentic emotion of Emma's testimony crumbled under scrutiny. Several journalists openly questioned the timing and source of the leaked papers, their skepticism evident in their follow-up questions. The conference ended with a wave of supportive applause, something rare in such settings. As Emma stepped away from the podium, she caught sight of Nathaniel's proud smile. The truth had prevailed, turning what was meant to be their downfall into a moment of triumph. The morning after the press conference, Nathaniel sat behind his mahogany desk at Maison Elegance, watching Emma organize the day's reservations with practiced efficiency. Her transformation over the past weeks had been remarkable. Where there was once uncertainty, now stood confidence. Where anger had blazed, understanding now flourished. "Emma, do you have a moment?" Nathaniel's voice carried across the restaurant's empty dining room. She looked up from her work, tucking a strand of auburn hair behind her ear. Of course. Her steps were sure as she made her way to his office. Nathaniel gestured to the chair across from him. "I've been watching you these past weeks. The way you handle challenges, your dedication to improvement, your natural leadership with the staff." Emma's cheeks flushed slightly at the praise. "I'm just trying my best." "That's exactly why I want to offer you something." Nathaniel leaned forward, his expression earnest. "I'd like you to take on the role of assistant manager here at Maison Elegance." Emma's green eyes widened. Her hands, resting in her lap, began to fidget. I don't know what to say. Are you sure? I mean, after everything that happened." "Because of everything that happened," Nathaniel corrected gently. "You've shown remarkable growth. The way you handled the press conference, your dedication to uncovering the truth about your father, your ability to face challenges head-on. These are qualities of a leader." Emma stood up and paced the office, her movements betraying her inner turmoil. "But I'm just a waitress. I don't have the experience, the education." "You have something more valuable," Nathaniel said, his voice steady. "You have resilience, understanding, empathy. These aren't things you can learn in school." "What if I mess up?" Her voice trembled slightly. "What if I let you down?" Nathaniel rose from his desk and approached her. "Everyone makes mistakes, Emma. Look at how far you've come from that first day when you slapped me." His warm chuckle filled the room. "You turned that moment into an opportunity for growth. That's what good leaders do." Emma's shoulders relaxed slightly, but doubt still clouded her features. "You really think I can do this?" "I know you can." Nathaniel's conviction was unwavering. "The staff already respects you. You understand both sides of service, the struggles and the successes. That's invaluable." Emma took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders. The morning light streaming through the office windows caught the tears gathering in her eyes, but her voice was steady when she spoke. "Thank you for believing in me. I accept." The autumn breeze rustled through the trees as Emma pulled up to her father's modest house in Indiana. The peeling paint and creaky front steps didn't seem as shabby now. They told a story of survival rather than failure. She clutched a photo album against her chest, one she'd found while cleaning out her apartment. Daniel opened the door before she could knock, his weathered face breaking into a tentative smile. "Emma, I wasn't expecting you so soon." "I found something I thought we could look at together." she said, holding up the album. Her voice was steadier than during their last emotional encounter. They settled on his worn couch, the same one where days ago they'd had their difficult conversation about the past. This time, the tension had eased. Emma opened the album, and a photo of her 6th birthday party slipped out. "Look at that cake," Daniel chuckled, pointing to the lopsided homemade creation in the picture. "Your mother always said I should leave the baking to her." Emma smiled, touching the photograph gently. "I remember you stayed up all night making it because Mom had the flu. It might not have looked perfect, but it was chocolate. My favorite." As they turned the pages, memories flowed more easily. Daniel pointed to a photo of Emma riding her first bike, his hand steady on the seat as she pedaled. "You were so determined to learn. Wouldn't let me hold on for more than a second." "I got a lot of scrapes and bruises that summer," Emma admitted, "but you always cleaned them up and got me back on the bike." Daniel's eyes grew misty. "You've always been strong, Emma, even now watching you at that press conference, standing up for what's right. I'm so proud of the woman you've become." Emma felt tears welling up in her own eyes. "I understand. Better now, Dad. Why you left. It doesn't erase the hurt, but I know you were trying to protect us in your own way." "I made mistakes," Daniel acknowledged, his voice rough with emotion. "Big ones. But loving you and wanting the best for you, that was never one of them." Emma reached for his hand, noting how it trembled slightly in hers. "Thank you for doing what you could, even when it was hard. The trust fund, even though I never got it, knowing you tried to provide for me means a lot." "You've done more than provide for yourself," Daniel said. "You've built a life, faced your challenges head on. That's worth more than any trust fund." The afternoon light filtered through the windows, casting a warm glow over them as they continued sharing stories. Each memory seemed to repair another thread of their broken bond. Finally, Emma closed the album and turned to her father. "I'd like to try having regular dinners together. Maybe once a week. We have a lot of catching up to do." Daniel's eyes lit up. "I'd like that very much." They stood, and for a moment they both hesitated. Then Emma stepped forward, wrapping her arms around her father. Daniel hugged her back tightly, his shoulders shaking slightly as he held his daughter for the first time in years. It wasn't a perfect ending to their story. There were still wounds that needed healing, trust that needed rebuilding. But as they embraced, both father and daughter knew it was a new beginning. The morning light streamed through the windows of Maison Elegance as Nathaniel guided Emma through the restaurant's daily operations. His patient voice explained everything from inventory management to staff scheduling, while Emma absorbed every detail with eager attention. "The key to successful management isn't just about numbers," Nathaniel said, his dark eyes warm with encouragement. "It's about understanding people." He gestured toward the bustling kitchen where the staff prepared for lunch service. Emma nodded, taking careful notes in her leather-bound notebook. "Like how Chef Marcus prefers early morning deliveries, and Sarah needs Tuesday evenings off for her son's baseball games." "Exactly." Nathaniel's face lit up with approval. "You're already thinking like a manager." Over the next few weeks, Emma shadowed Nathaniel through every aspect of the restaurant. She watched how he handled difficult customers with grace, mediated staff conflicts with wisdom, and maintained the delicate balance between quality and cost. With each passing day, her admiration for him grew. One afternoon, as they reviewed the wine inventory, Emma found herself sharing stories about her childhood. "You know, my dad used to say something similar about people skills," she said softly. "Before everything fell apart, I mean." Nathaniel set down his tablet and gave her his full attention. "Your father made mistakes, Emma, but he also gave you strength. I see it in how quickly you're learning, in your determination to succeed." Emma felt tears prick at her corners of her eyes. Nathaniel's words touched something deep within her. The way he believed in her, supported her, reminded her of the father she'd once known. But now she had two father figures in her life, each helping her grow in different ways. The real test came during the restaurant's busy Friday dinner service. The head waiter called in sick, 2 large parties arrived without reservations, and the kitchen ran low on the evening's special. Emma felt her heart race as she faced her first crisis as manager. Taking a deep breath, she remembered Nathaniel's lessons. She quickly reorganized the serving stations, called in a backup waiter from the sister restaurant across town, and worked with Chef Marcus to create an alternative special that would impress the guests. "Stay calm," she heard Nathaniel's voice in her head. "Solutions come when you keep your cool." The staff watched her closely, some skeptical of the former waitress now giving orders. But as the evening progressed and her plan worked smoothly, their doubts transformed into respect. Even Caroline Hughes, the stern senior manager who had once reprimanded her, gave an approving nod. By closing time, the crisis had passed. The guests left, happy. The kitchen remained organized, and the staff worked together seamlessly. Emma stood in the quiet dining room, exhausted but proud. "Well done," Nathaniel's voice came from behind her. He had been watching from a distance, letting her handle everything on her own. "You've earned their respect tonight." Emma smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. "I had a good teacher." "You had it in you all along," Nathaniel replied, giving her shoulder a paternal squeeze. "Sometimes we just need someone to help us see it." Emma's hands trembled slightly as she signed the final document releasing her trust fund. Nathaniel sat beside her in the law office, his steady presence a comfort in this pivotal moment. The lawyer, a silver-haired woman in her 50s, smiled warmly as she collected the papers. "Everything's in order, Miss Daniels. The funds will be available in your account within 48 hours. Emma took a deep breath, her green eyes glistening with emotion. After years of scraping by, of late-night shifts and constant worry, the weight of financial uncertainty was finally lifting from her shoulders. Later that afternoon, she sat at her desk in Maison Elegance, methodically working through a list of old family debts. One by one, she cleared them. The mortgage company that had foreclosed on their house, the credit card bills that had haunted her father, even the small personal loans from former neighbors who had tried to help. With each payment processed, Emma felt lighter. The burden that had shaped so much of her life was dissolving, replaced by a profound sense of peace. She thought of her father, living in his modest Indiana home, and how this would affect him too. No more shame, no more running. "How does it feel?" Nathaniel asked from the doorway, his voice gentle. "Like I can finally breathe," Emma replied, wiping away a tear. "All these years, these debts were like chains holding us down. Now they're just gone." She looked around her office, in the restaurant where she'd started as a waitress just months ago. The framed Employee of the Month photo on the wall, the stack of inventory reports she'd mastered, the business cards with her name and assistant manager printed in elegant script. Each item told a story of how far she'd come. The trust fund money wasn't just erasing old debts, it was opening new doors. She'd enrolled in business classes at the local college, determined to grow into her role at Maison Elegance. A portion was set aside for investments following Nathaniel's careful guidance. Emma sat back in her chair, feeling the unfamiliar but welcome sensation of true security. Not just financial security, but the emotional stability that came from healing old wounds and building new foundations. Her relationship with her father was mending. She had a mentor who believed in her, and for the first time in years, she could look to the future with hope instead of fear. The morning newspaper headlines blazed across Manhattan. Restaurant mogul Victor Lane, accused of fraud. Emma stood in Maison Elegance's kitchen, clutching the paper while staff members gathered around her, their faces a mix of shock and satisfaction. Linda Marks had uncovered a trail of suspicious transactions linking Victor to multiple cases of tax evasion and employee exploitation. His attempts to smear Nathaniel and Emma had led investigators straight to his own illegal activities. "It seems karma has a way of working things out," Nathaniel said, walking into the kitchen with his characteristic calm demeanor. His dark eyes held a hint of satisfaction as he placed a gentle hand on Emma's shoulder. The evidence was overwhelming. Victor had been cooking his books for years, underpaying staff and pocketing the difference. His desperate attempt to discredit Nathaniel had backfired spectacularly when one of his former accountants came forward with damning documentation. "I can't believe he thought he could get away with it," Emma said, shaking her head. The staff murmured in agreement, several nodding vigorously. Carolyn Hughes, who had once reprimanded Emma for the slap incident, now stood proudly beside her. "That man had it coming for years," she declared, her stern face softening into a smile. "Nobody messes with our family here at Maison Elegance." The news spread quickly through the restaurant industry. Victor's empire began crumbling as investigations expanded to all his establishments. Meanwhile, Maison Elegance flourished under Emma's management, with reservations booked months in advance. That evening, Nathaniel gathered the entire staff in the main dining room. Servers, cooks, and kitchen staff stood in a circle, champagne glasses in hand. The crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over their faces as Nathaniel raised his glass. "To Emma," he said, his voice carrying across the room, "who showed us that truth and perseverance always prevail." Emma felt her cheeks flush as the staff erupted in applause. She looked around at these people who had become her second family, the sous chef who had taught her about kitchen operations, the waitstaff who now looked to her for guidance, even the dishwashers who greeted her with genuine smiles every morning. "To Maison Elegance," Emma responded, lifting her own glass. "And to Nathaniel, who taught me that sometimes the hardest challenges bring the greatest rewards." The staff cheered, clinking glasses and sharing knowing looks. They had witnessed Emma's journey from that first dramatic day to her current position of respect and authority. Her leadership style, combining Nathaniel's wisdom with her own natural empathy, had transformed the restaurant's atmosphere. As the celebration continued, Emma caught Nathaniel's eye across the room. He gave her a subtle nod, his face reflecting the pride of a mentor who had watched his protege exceed all expectations. In that moment, surrounded by the warmth and support of her restaurant family, Emma felt truly vindicated. Victor's schemes hadn't just failed, they had made Maison Elegance stronger than ever. The late afternoon sun streamed through the windows of Nathaniel's office at Maison Elegance, casting warm shadows across the polished mahogany desk. Emma sat across from him, reviewing the day's receipts when he cleared his throat softly. "Emma, there's something I'd like to give you," Nathaniel said, reaching into his desk drawer. His usually steady hands seemed to tremble slightly as he pulled out a small velvet box. Emma's heart skipped a beat. The box looked familiar, like the ones used for fine jewelry. She set down her pen, her full attention now on Nathaniel's gentle expression. "These past months have shown me something remarkable," he continued, his voice warm and sincere. "I've watched you grow from someone who was hurting and uncertain into a strong, capable leader." He opened the box slowly, revealing a golden ring that caught the sunlight. Emma's breath caught in her throat. The ring was nearly identical to her father's, the same intricate pattern, the same family crest. But this one was clearly new, its surface unmarked by time. "I had this made specially," Nathaniel explained, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Not to replace the original, but to honor your journey. Every time you look at it, I want you to remember how far you've come." Emma's vision blurred with tears as she stared at the ring. Her fingers trembled as she reached out to touch it, tracing the familiar pattern she'd known since childhood. The metal was cool against her skin, but it seemed to warm instantly to her touch. "Nathaniel, She struggled to find words, overwhelmed by the gesture. This wasn't just a piece of jewelry. It was a symbol of everything she'd faced, everything she'd overcome. It represented not just her past, but her future. "You don't have to say anything," Nathaniel said softly. He lifted the ring from its velvet bed and held it out to her. "I've seen your strength, your determination, your heart. You've earned this, Emma. Not just the ring, but everything you've achieved." With hands that shook slightly, Emma accepted the ring. She slipped it onto her finger, where it fit perfectly. The weight of it felt right, like a missing piece falling into place. Looking down at her hand, she saw not just the ring, but everything it represented. Her father's love, Nathaniel's guidance, her own growth and resilience. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she admired how the ring caught the light. In its gleaming surface, she saw reflections of all the moments that had led her here, the painful confrontations, the difficult revelations, the gradual healing, and the unexpected friendship that had changed her life. The ring was more than just a replica of a family heirloom. It was a bridge between her past and her future, a reminder that she could honor her history while forging her own path forward. With this ring on her finger, she felt anchored and empowered all at once. The evening rush at Maison Elegance hummed with energy as Emma moved through the dining room, greeting regular customers and checking on her staff. The restaurant had transformed under her leadership, maintaining its elegance while becoming more welcoming to a diverse crowd. "Your vision for the weekly community dinners is brilliant, Sarah," one of the longtime servers whispered as they passed each other. "We're actually making a difference." Emma smiled, remembering how nervous she'd been when proposing the idea to offer reduced-price fine dining experiences to families who could never afford Maison Elegance otherwise. The program had not only filled tables during slower weeknights, but had also generated positive press and goodwill throughout the community. At a corner table, she spotted Mrs. Rodriguez, a retired teacher who'd become a regular at the community dinners, teaching her granddaughter proper table etiquette. The little girl caught Emma's eye and waved excitedly. Emma waved back, her heart warming at the sight. "The new menu items are selling well," Chef Marcus reported during their nightly check-in. "That fusion section you suggested? It's bringing in younger customers who wouldn't typically choose fine dining." Emma nodded, checking the night's numbers on her tablet. The restaurant's revenue had increased by 30% since she'd implemented her changes. But more than the financial success, she took pride in how the staff morale had improved. She'd introduced a profit-sharing program and educational opportunities for employees wanting to advance their careers. "Remember when you thought you weren't qualified for this position?" Lisa, the hostess, teased as Emma helped her reorganize the reservation system. Emma laughed, remembering her initial self-doubt. Now, she moved through her responsibilities with confidence, drawing from both her past struggles and Nathaniel's mentorship to create an environment where everyone felt valued. From his usual table near the window, Nathaniel observed Emma's interactions with quiet satisfaction. He watched as she stopped to help a busboy who was struggling with a heavy tray, showing him an easier way to balance the load. Her natural leadership style, combining authority with compassion, had transformed Maison Elegance into more than just a successful business. It had become a community. Emma caught Nathaniel's eye across the room and smiled. She remembered the frightened, angry young woman who had once slapped him in this very dining room. That moment of desperation had led to an unexpected journey of healing and growth. Now, she used her experience to help others, particularly in her hiring practices, giving chances to people who needed a fresh start. The restaurant buzzed with conversation and laughter, a perfect blend of its traditional upscale clientele and the new, more diverse crowd Emma had attracted. As she made her final rounds for the evening, checking in with each table, Nathaniel felt a surge of pride. His investment in Emma had yielded returns far beyond anything he could have anticipated. She had proven that success didn't require compromising values or forgetting where you came from. Instead, she'd found ways to lift others as she rose, creating opportunities and fostering understanding across social barriers that had once seemed insurmountable. Nathaniel watched as Emma stopped to chat with a young waitress who reminded him of how Emma had been when she first started. The same determination shone in the girl's eyes, and under Emma's guidance, she was already showing promise. It was a testament to Emma's ability to recognize and nurture potential in others, just as he had done for her. The private dining room at Maison Elegance glowed with warm light as Emma surveyed the gathering before her. Daniel sat at the elegantly set table, chatting with Caroline Hughes, who had become one of Emma's strongest supporters. The kitchen staff had outdone themselves, presenting course after course of their finest dishes. "This sauce is incredible," Daniel said, savoring a bite of perfectly seared salmon. His eyes met Emma's, filled with pride. "You've really found your place here, sweetheart." Emma smiled, touching the replica ring on her finger. The weight of it felt right now. No longer a reminder of loss, but a symbol of everything she'd gained. She watched as Nathaniel shared a laugh with some of the servers, his usual commanding presence softened by the intimate atmosphere. The clink of glasses and warm conversation filled the room. Emma remembered her first day here, the anger and fear that had driven her to strike Nathaniel. Now, looking at the faces around the table, her father, her mentor, her colleagues who had become family, she felt overwhelming gratitude. "Everything all right?" Nathaniel asked, appearing at her side. "More than all right," Emma replied, watching Daniel chat animatedly with the sous chef about the restaurant's signature dishes. "I never thought I'd have this again, a real family dinner." "You've earned it," Nathaniel said softly. "Your strength brought everyone here together." As the dessert plates were cleared, Emma caught glimpses of her journey in every corner of the restaurant. The table where she'd first seen Nathaniel's ring, the office where he'd offered understanding instead of judgment, the kitchen where she'd learned to lead with confidence, and the evening began to wind down, and guests started saying their goodbyes. Daniel hugged Emma tightly, whispering, "I'm so proud of you, Emma. So proud." His voice cracked slightly, and Emma squeezed him back, the last traces of old pain melting away. As the final guests departed, Emma and Nathaniel stood in the quiet dining room. The city lights twinkled through the windows, and the gentle hum of the kitchen cleaning crew provided a soft backdrop to their moment of reflection. "I never properly thanked you," Emma said, turning to face her mentor. "Not just for the job or helping me find my father, but for believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself." Nathaniel smiled warmly. "You know, Emma, I came into this thinking I would be the teacher." He paused, his expression thoughtful. "But watching you rebuild your relationship with Daniel, seeing your determination to grow and learn, you've taught me just as much about courage and forgiveness." Emma's ring caught the light as she adjusted a centerpiece on the table, the familiar gesture now filled with confidence rather than nervous energy. In the quiet of the restaurant they'd both come to love, mentor and protege shared a moment of mutual appreciation, each grateful for the unexpected friendship that had changed their lives. If you enjoyed the story of Emma Daniels, I hand-picked this next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.